The next anchor is the anchor Indigo. The anchor Indigo is a topic that everyone should take into life. That indigo should be a way of life, and we do not only study when we are in a formal education, when we were in seminaries, or when we were in the universities and colleges, but even after we graduate, we continue to study, we continue to nourish our intellect, and we continue to increase in wisdom. We need to study because the more we know, the more we can share. And the more we can share, the more we can become icons of the greatest love. We can become protagonists of the greatest love. If we know many things, we can defend the faith with all charity, and we can share the life in its purity and entirety. But we should not fall into just nourishing our intellectual capacity or intellectual aspect. We should move on from being intellectual to becoming men and women of virtue. And the virtue would be from intelligence to becoming a man or women of wisdom. And we acquire wisdom if we concretely live the life that we understand through the intellect. We might understand God, we might nourish God intellectually in our theology, in our philosophy, but if we do not live the life of God in us, among us, and in our souls, in the indwelling of God in our souls, indwelling of the Blessed Trinity in our souls, then it becomes an intellectual gymnastics. It doesn't go down to the level of life, and therefore it does not become wisdom. So in reality, we nourish our intellectual capacity from everything that we encounter, from the books that we read, from the persons that we encounter, from issues, whether personal, social, ecclesiastical, and etc. These are ways and means for us to nourish our intelligence. But let us not forget that studies intellectual aspects without living will remain empty and will remain in vain. Why is it that indigo should be a very important anchor? Because in our time, the devil seems to attack the intellect of every individual. The devil tries to distort the truth, and it uses the mind to prove that there is another truth. a truth that is proposed by the devil. That is why it's very important, in order to see whether it is an intelligence that is coming from God, if it is validated in truth, and I think above all, if it is lived in our life, and if this living produces a life of love, the indwelling of the Blessed Trinity in our hearts and in our communities. This is the present struggle of, I think, the church in this time, when there are falsifications of truth, and there is this alteration of truth, and there is this negation of truth using the intellect. Now, only with people who have love in their hearts are capable of really striving or achieving or living wisdom in their life. Concretely, everybody should study for life, not for grades. Every brother should excel in his academic performance. If your excellence is this much, if you excel, and if you perform well, and that is the way you excel, then you excel. Because if you study for life, then we have to exert our efforts, every single effort, to really study well, to understand well, and to live well. Every brother, as much as possible, when it is needed and when it is practical, if the community can afford, every brother should get the highest degree in order to be light to the church, to humanity, in sciences, in psychology, in philosophy, in all the disciplines of church life, church subjects, and even in civil life, civil subjects. Secular. We have to be in the world, but not of the world. We will dialogue in the academe. We will dialogue with every culture, and even non-believer, without fear. Because if we have wisdom in our hearts, we have nothing to fear. Because the greatest love is in our hearts, and therefore